Before we dive into this story, let me tell you something. For 4 years, I gave every weekend of my life to someone I loved more than anything. Then, in the blink of an eye, I was cut out. No explanation, no mercy. What came next wasn't revenge. It was truth. It was presence. It was the kind of justice that doesn't need to scream. Stick around. You'll want to hear this. And before we start, let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe. This one is going to stay with you. My name is Margaret Foster. I'm retired, widowed, and I live in a modest house in Richmond, Virginia, the kind of place with creaky porch steps and flowers planted more out of habit than hope. For the last 4 years, every single weekend of my life revolved around one person, my grandson, Ethan. He came into this world 7 years ago with a full head of dark hair and the most serious little face you could imagine. My daughter, Julia, wasn't exactly ready for motherhood when he arrived. She was overwhelmed juggling work, a rocky marriage, and a never-ending pile of bills. So when she asked if I could watch him just for a few weekends, I said yes without hesitation. I didn't even think about it. That was all it took. Those few weekends turned into 4 years. Every Friday evening, I picked Ethan up from daycare. We baked cookies, mostly chocolate chip, because that was his favorite. We watched movies, built pillow forts, and I read him stories until he fell asleep on my chest. I taught him how to ride a bike, how to tie his shoes, how to make scrambled eggs just right. When he had the flu, it was me rocking him through the night while Julia was out of town on business. When he lost his first tooth, he tucked it under my pillow. I was the one who saw him first thing Saturday morning and the one who kissed him goodbye. Every Sunday night, I didn't do any of it out of obligation. I did it out of love, because when Ethan smiled up at me and said, "You're my favorite person," I felt like I still had a purpose in this world. Julia rarely said thank you. Most weekends, she rushed in, picked him up without a word, barely making eye contact. At first, I chalked it up to stress. But as the years went on, the distance between us only grew. She criticized the snacks I gave him, rolled her eyes when I offered advice. Once, she snapped at me for trimming his nails, saying I was crossing boundaries. Boundaries? I had wiped that child's tears, bathed him, fed him, loved him more deeply than I ever thought possible. But for her, it was never enough, or maybe it was too much. Too much for her ego. Too much of a reminder of what she hadn't done. Still, I stayed quiet. I swallowed my pride, bit my tongue, smiled when I wanted to cry, because being in Ethan's life mattered more than winning an argument. That little boy didn't ask to be the rope in a silent tug-of-war between his mother and grandmother. Then came the day everything started to change. It was a normal Saturday morning. Ethan was glued to his tablet, watching those fast, loud videos that always made me uneasy. His eyes were glazed over, fingers tapping like he was hypnotized. I sat beside him and gently said, "Sweetheart, maybe it's time for a break. Let's play outside for a bit." He looked at me and nodded. Ethan never gave me trouble, but right then, Julia walked in with her arms full of grocery bags. She heard me and froze. "I told you," she said, not even looking at me. "I let him use the tablet as long as he wants. It's not a big deal," I replied calmly. "I just think a little fresh air wouldn't hurt. That's all." She dropped the bags on the counter with more force than necessary. "You always think you know best, don't you?" she snapped. "Always have to interfere?" I was stunned. I wasn't interfering, I was just. She cut me off. "You don't need to come next weekend." "I've got it," I blinked, unsure if I'd heard her correctly. "What do you mean?" "I mean," she said, grabbing her keys without even looking at me, "you don't need to watch him anymore. I'll make other arrangements." And with that, she walked out. I stood there for a long time in the silence that followed, my hands trembling, my heart pounding in my ears, unsure whether what I felt was anger, heartbreak, or both. All I knew was that something had shattered, something I never believed could break. I told myself it was just a bad moment, that Julia would cool down, that everything would blow over. But deep down, I knew something had changed forever, and I wasn't prepared for what was coming next. The days after that Saturday blurred together in a fog of confusion and hurt. I kept checking my phone, waiting for Julia to call or text, waiting for her to say she'd overreacted. But nothing came. No messages. No apologies. Just silence. By Thursday, I still hadn't heard a single word. That's when I saw it. I was scrolling through Facebook, something I started doing mindlessly after my husband passed, when her post appeared. I wasn't looking for anything, but there it was. A bright, cheerful banner that read, "Ethan's turning, come celebrate with us." Attached was a digital invitation. Balloons, cupcakes, the whole thing. There were over 30 names tagged in the post: cousins, neighbors, friends from her yoga class. Everyone except me. I stared at the screen, reading it over and over, thinking maybe I'd missed my name. Maybe it was a mistake, but it wasn't. This wasn't an oversight. It was deliberate, calculated. She was throwing a birthday party for the boy I had practically raised and I wasn't invited. I clicked on the comments. The usual stream of emojis and can't wait messages. One aunt even wrote, "So happy for Ethan, he's lucky to have such a great mom," that one cut deep. I didn't respond. I didn't comment. I just closed my laptop and sat there in the silence, the kind that presses against your chest and makes it hard to breathe. That evening, I tried calling Julia, no answer. I left a message, "Julia, please. Can we talk? I don't understand what's happening." She didn't call back. I tried again the next day. This time, she answered. Her voice was flat. "What is it, Mom?" I saw the post, I said quietly. "You're really doing this without me?" She sighed long and dramatic, the kind of sigh that tells you you're already losing. "I told you I need some space. We're keeping it small this year. Close friends. No stress, no stress," I repeated, letting out a bitter laugh. "Julia, I've watched Ethan every weekend for 4 years. I changed his diapers. I held him through night terrors. And now I'm not close enough to be at his birthday." She didn't answer right away. Then, softly, she said, "Mom, I just think we need boundaries. You don't always respect how I do things." My mouth went dry. "So this is punishment?" "It's not punishment," she said. "It's a decision then." Almost as an afterthought, she added, "Anyway, I have to go," and just like that, she hung up. I stood in my kitchen, phone still in my hand, feeling like I'd been slapped. Boundaries? I had spent the last decade tiptoeing around every word, every opinion, just to stay close. I bent myself in half to keep the peace, and now, I was being erased. I didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, I started thinking. I thought about all the early mornings packing his bag, the school projects I helped with, the plans I canceled, the pain I pushed through, the needs I ignored just to be there. I thought about the way Ethan used to run into my arms, calling me Mimi like it was the most natural thing in the world. And now, in his mother's eyes, I was an outsider. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, the room lit only by the soft glow of my bedside lamp. I picked up a photo of Ethan from my nightstand, him in a red hoodie, frosting on his chin, grinning like the world was made of cake and love. That's when the tears finally came, hot, angry. But beneath the sorrow, something else began to rise, not rage, not revenge. Resolve. If she wanted to rewrite the story and erase me from it, fine. I would write my own chapter and I would do it for him. I didn't know how yet. But I knew one thing for sure. I would not go quietly. Friday morning arrived heavy and gray. I woke before sunrise, partly out of habit, partly because sleep had abandoned me. My mind replayed the same memories over and over. Ethan in his Halloween costume. Ethan asleep on my chest. Ethan drawing crooked little hearts with Mimi written inside. I had no plans that day. No pickup time. No grocery list for snacks. No little backpack by the door. For the first time in years, my weekend was completely empty. I wandered through the house like a stranger. His toys were still tucked into the basket by the fireplace. His toothbrush still sat beside mine in the upstairs bathroom. Everything in that house whispered Ethan, and the silence was a scream I couldn't escape. I sat down with my coffee, my hands still trembling slightly, and opened Facebook again. I didn't want to. I knew it would hurt. But something in me needed to see it. The party plans were unfolding in real time. Julia had posted another update, a photo of the birthday cake. 2 tears. Superhero-themed fondant letters spelling Ethan is. The caption read, "Can't wait to celebrate my boy. Sunday's going to be amazing." My stomach twisted. Comments poured in, "Looks delicious. He's growing up so fast. Best mom ever." I didn't belong in that world anymore, the one where my daughter was the loving parent and I was just background noise, forgotten. At some point, I checked the list of people tagged again, friends, family, even my neighbor Ruth was going. Ruth, the woman I'd given my casserole recipe to. The one who came over for tea after her surgery. She hadn't even mentioned it, and me? Still nothing. Not a message. Not a call. Not even a polite excuse. I was being erased not just from the event, but from my own family's story. So I did what I always do when the pain gets too loud. I cleaned. I scrubbed the kitchen floor until my knees ached. Washed every dish. Wiped down every counter. Rearranged the books in the den by color, then by size. Polished the picture frames. That's when I saw it, on the hallway shelf. Between 2 ceramic birds Ethan had given me for Mother's Day was a framed photo of us at the zoo. He was maybe 5. We were standing by the giraffe enclosure, both holding ice cream cones. Chocolate smeared all over his chin. And me looking at him with that expression where love spills out. Even when you're not trying. I took the frame down, sat on the floor, and pressed it to my chest. How could she do this? It wasn't just the party. It was everything, the years of biting my tongue, the way she dismissed me, corrected me in front of others, treated my love like an inconvenience. Like I was something she tolerated rather than cherished, but I kept going for Ethan. Because he was the light. The one who made it all worth it. The one who looked at me with wonder, not resentment. The one who never made me feel like too much. And now even that was being taken from me. I didn't eat that day. I didn't speak to anyone. I sat in that hallway until the sun went down, holding that picture like it was the only proof I had that I mattered. Sometime after midnight, I picked up my phone and opened the family group chat. There it was again, more chatter about the party. A cousin asking what time to show up. Someone else offering to bring extra chairs. Still nothing to me. I typed a message. My fingers shaking. Thanks to everyone who's going to Ethan's party on Sunday. I won't be there. I wasn't invited. Then I hit send. It was the quietest scream I'd ever let out. No one replied. Not right away. Not for hours. But I'd said it. I'd stopped pretending. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt the faintest flicker of something I hadn't felt in years. Anger, clarity, strength. I was no longer just a forgotten grandmother. I was a woman who had been deeply hurt and who had finally decided to stop swallowing the pain. And what I did next. That's when everything changed. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan as it spun overhead, listening to its faint ticking like a clock counting down to something inevitable. Morning arrived with dull gray light leaking through the curtains. I felt hollow, but I wasn't broken. Not yet. That message in the group chat stirred something, not because anyone replied. They didn't, but because, for once, I hadn't swallowed my truth. Saturday morning came, the day I was supposed to have Ethan. The day we usually baked muffins or built cardboard rocket ships. But my kitchen was cold. My living room was quiet. I tried to distract myself. I turned on the TV but couldn't follow a single word. I made toast and let it go cold. I watered the garden, then sat on the back steps for over an hour, just watching the breeze move through the trees. It wasn't until I went back inside that I noticed a missed call from Ruth. I stared at the screen, unsure if I had the energy to listen. But I tapped the voicemail anyway. Hey, Margaret. I saw your message. I didn't realize you weren't invited. I just assumed. She paused. I'm sorry. If I had known, I wouldn't have. Anyway, if you need anything, I'm here. Her voice sounded uncomfortable. Guilty but not guilty enough to back out of the party. The message didn't hurt. It only confirmed what I already knew. People prefer to stay comfortable, even if it means choosing silence over truth. That afternoon, I went upstairs to Ethan's room, or as much of a room as he had in my house. Really, it was just a corner of the guest room, a small bed with dinosaur sheets, a rocket-shaped lamp, a basket filled with well-loved toys. I sat there and let the memories come. Ethan brushing my hair with his tiny fingers. Ethan telling me I was better than Santa. Ethan falling asleep with his hand in mine. I thought I'd only feel sadness, and I did. But something else was there too, rising slowly, like smoke curling from a steady flame. That's when I realized I had a choice. I could keep letting Julia dictate my place in Ethan's life, treating me like a side character in a story I helped write. Or I could remind everyone exactly who I was, not with bitterness, not with cruelty, with truth, with love, with presence. I stood up, wiped my eyes, and went to my desk. I pulled out a notebook and started making a list, a very specific list. Decorations, cupcakes. A venue. I knew Ethan's favorite theme. I knew the flavor of cake he loved. I knew his friends, his little cousins, the songs that made him dance. And I knew his birthday wasn't just another Sunday on Julia's calendar. It was a celebration of a life I had poured my heart into. So I made a plan. I would throw him a birthday party, not a protest, not a tantrum. A celebration one day earlier, one day before the real party. A day that would remind everyone, and especially Ethan, that I had been there all along. I wouldn't tell Julia. This wasn't about her. This was about showing Ethan and myself that I hadn't disappeared, that I wouldn't be erased. That night, I called the church down the street where Ethan had once sung in the Christmas play. They had a small community hall. I'd helped with bake sales there. I knew the coordinator. Helen answered on the second ring. Margaret? She said, surprised. What can I do for you? I need a favor, I said, my voice steady. I want to book the hall for a birthday party tomorrow. She hesitated. That's short notice, I know, I said. But it's important. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, you've always shown up for us. Of course we'll make it happen. I nearly cried, not because of the favor, but because someone saw me, saw my value. I stayed up most of the night, pulling old boxes down from the attic, streamers, paper lanterns, tablecloths from past holidays. I dusted off folding chairs, wiped down platters, made lists, placed phone calls, and sent invitations, not to people who would judge me but to people who knew me. I didn't ask anyone to take sides. I just told the truth. I'm throwing a small birthday party for Ethan on Saturday at the church hall. I'd love for you to come. Some people hesitated. Some didn't reply right away, but others said yes, and that was enough. At 2 in the morning, as I packed goodie bags surrounded by balloons and frosting smeared utensils, I looked around and felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Not sadness, not anger. Purpose. Tomorrow, I would show up not because I was invited but because I mattered. Because he mattered. And no one could take that away from me. I woke up early, before the sun. My hands ached from all the preparation, blowing balloons, tying ribbons, icing cupcakes, but I didn't care. My whole body buzzed with a strange mix of nerves and something I hadn't felt in weeks. Anticipation. I brewed my coffee and stood at the kitchen window. It was still dark outside, but I could see the first hints of morning breaking through. Today wasn't just Saturday. It was our day, mine and Ethan's. The day we took back something no one ever had the right to take from us. By early morning, I was already at the church hall. Helen had opened up and helped me drag in the folding tables. The place wasn't fancy linoleum floors, those clunky plastic chairs that always wobble, but I was going to fill it with color, with joy, with us. I laid out the decorations. Dinosaurs, because that was still Ethan's obsession. Green streamers, Dino print plates, a banner I made myself that read "His big day." I hung it crooked at first, and instead of fixing it, I laughed. He'd love that. The cake arrived chocolate with vanilla filling, little plastic dinosaurs climbing up the sides. I'd ordered it from the same bakery that made his first birthday cake. The woman at the counter had smiled when I told her it was for my grandson. "He's lucky to have a grandma like you," she said. She didn't know the half of it. By noon, the tables were set and the smell of freshly baked cupcakes filled the room. People began to trickle in: cousins, friends from church, even one of Ethan's classmates with his parents. Each person who walked through the door carried more than a gift. They brought validation, quiet loyalty, unspoken understanding. And then, right on time, Ethan arrived. He thought he was just coming over for our usual Saturday. Julia had dropped him off early, clearly eager to be free while she prepared for her party the next day. She didn't even walk him to the door. He burst in, backpack swinging, yelling, "Mimi." "Hey, buddy," I said, kneeling down to hug him. "Want to take a little ride?" He grinned. "Where to?" "You'll see." We got in the car, and he asked question after question the entire way. I told him we had a surprise. He tried guessing: the park, the zoo, a toy store. When we pulled up to the church hall and I opened the doors for him, his jaw dropped. The room erupted with applause and cheers. Music played softly in the background. Tables overflowed with food, decorations, and most importantly, people who understood what this day meant. Ethan turned to me, eyes wide. Is this for me?" "All for you, sweetheart," I said, fighting back tears. He ran into the room, touching everything, hugging everyone. He danced, he played games. He laughed, that deep, belly laugh only children have, and every time he looked at me, I saw something I'd been afraid I'd lost: connection, recognition, love. We ate cake. He blew out the candles. I helped him open presents. At one point, he leaned in and whispered, "This is the best party ever, Mimi," and just like that, every ache, every insult, every rejection faded into the background because this was real. This joy, this bond, this truth. I noticed a few people taking pictures, posting them online. I didn't stop them. Let Julia see. Let her scroll through her phone tomorrow and realize she didn't get to write the whole story. That no matter how tightly she tried to control the narrative, I was still in it. Not because I demanded my place, because I earned it later. As guests said their goodbyes and the hall grew quiet, Ethan walked over holding a piece of cake. "Do I get to birthdays now?" he asked, half serious. I smiled. "Well, this one's special. This one's just for us." He nodded and rested his head against my arm. I held him close, breathing in the moment. I didn't know what Julia would say when she found out. I didn't know what would come next. But right then, with Ethan in my arms and the people who mattered around us, I felt whole again. I had shown up. I had reminded the world and myself who I was. And nothing would ever take that away. I barely slept that night, but for the first time in weeks. It wasn't from pain. It was peace. A quiet satisfaction hummed beneath my skin. I had done it. I had given Ethan the kind of day he deserved. And I had reminded myself that I wasn't invisible. But the silence that followed the party was thick and heavy like the air before a storm. Sunday morning, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of lukewarm coffee and waited. I knew Julia would find out. The photos were already making their way through the family circle, smiling faces. A dinosaur cake. Ethan holding a balloon in each hand, beaming, completely unaware of the emotional battlefield surrounding him. I didn't know how or when the explosion would come, but I knew it was coming. It happened just after noon. I was putting away dishes when the knock came hard and fast, no rhythm to it. My heart kicked against my chest before my feet even moved. When I opened the door, Julia was standing there, arms crossed, Eyes sharp. You threw him a party, she said. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. I took a breath. Yes, I did. Her mouth twisted. She stepped forward, as if to come inside without asking. I moved aside and gestured toward the doorway. She didn't take it. I'm not here for coffee, Mom. I didn't offer, I said quieter than I expected. She stared at me, jaw tight. You completely overstepped. That was my party to throw, and I'm his grandmother, I replied, matching her tone. I've been with him every weekend for 4 years. You took that away without warning, without explanation, and then you threw a party I wasn't even invited to. So no, Julia. I didn't ask. Because you made it very clear my presence wasn't wanted, she blinked. Like the words had struck her. You're always making yourself the victim. I let out a hollow laugh. You think this is about me? This is about a little boy who deserves to be celebrated by everyone who loves him. And whether you like it or not, I love him. I've been there for him. He's my son, she snapped, and he's my grandson, I shot back. That doesn't disappear because you're having a bad week and decide to punish someone for a moment. We stood there in the doorway, breathing hard. Two women who had been circling this fight for years, only now it had finally erupted. You always do this, she said bitterly. You act like you know best. Like you're the only one who cares. Something in me cracked, not from anger, but from years of quiet heartbreak. I know what it feels like to be dismissed by your own child, I said softly. To be treated like background noise. Like everything I gave, everything I am is just a nuisance now. Julia looked away. I saw her eyes flicker just for a second. I'm tired of shrinking myself so you can be comfortable, I continued. I've done it for years. But I won't apologize for loving Ethan. I won't apologize for showing up when no one else did. There was a long pause, the kind where truth fills every inch of space. Finally, she muttered, you should have told me. I shouldn't have had to, I said. But I did tell you 100 different ways. You just never listened. She turned then and walked back down the steps toward her car. I didn't call after her. I didn't beg. I just stood there in the doorway of my own home, heart pounding, hands steady. She didn't slam the car door. She didn't drive off fast. But she didn't say goodbye either, and as I watched her pull away, something unexpected washed over me. Not regret, relief. For once, I had spoken my truth without flinching. I didn't know what would happen next, whether she'd retaliate, keep Ethan from me, or let this become the final wedge between us. But I knew one thing for sure. I had finally stopped asking for permission to matter. And that was the beginning of something I'd been waiting for my entire life. Sunday arrived with a weight I couldn't ignore. It wasn't guilt. I'd shed that skin the moment Julia walked away from my porch without a word. No. This was something else. Anticipation, a knowing. The feeling that something was about to shift. I didn't expect to hear from her. I knew she wouldn't call. What I didn't know was that I was about to watch my quietest act of defiance echo louder than any argument we'd ever had. It started with the photos. By noon, I received a message from Linda, my cousin from out of state. Saw the pictures from Ethan's party. It looked beautiful. You did right, Margaret. Don't let anyone tell you different. I stared at the message, only then realizing I'd been holding my breath. The pictures were out there. Ethan smiling. Ethan hugging me. Ethan holding his cake, missing tooth, cheeks glowing in a way I hadn't seen in months. More messages came in. One from a neighbor. Didn't know Julia was excluding you. Honestly, that was low, especially from a fellow church member. You're the heart of that boy's life. Don't forget that. Some people didn't say anything outright. Just heart emojis. Quiet acknowledgements. A silent we see you. I didn't reply to most of them. I didn't need to. The party had already spoken for itself. Then came the update I hadn't been looking for. A photo Julia posted from her party. The backdrop was elaborate, one of those rented Instagram-ready balloon arches. A DJ in the background. Catered food. Everything expensive, polished, perfect. And yet, something was wrong. Ethan looked tired. He stood in the center of the photo holding a slice of untouched cake. His eyes not on the camera but somewhere else entirely. His smile didn't reach his eyes. His shoulders slumped just enough to tell me everything I needed to know. That wasn't his real birthday. His real birthday had already happened. It happened in that little church hall with wrinkled tablecloths, dollar store decorations, and a grandmother who knew his favorite color, his favorite dance move, and exactly how to make him laugh until he snorted. That's where his heart had been, and apparently, I wasn't the only one who noticed. As the day went on, people started talking. A cousin messaged me, honestly, today's party felt off. Ethan kept talking about the one yesterday. Another wrote, he told everyone his real birthday already happened at Mimi's, and that's when it hit me. My silence had been louder than Julia's eraser. By not fighting back, by not dragging her name through the mud, by simply showing up for Ethan and loving him the only way I knew how, I had drawn a line. She couldn't cross dots. She could control a guest list. She could control a calendar, but she couldn't control love. She couldn't control what Ethan remembered. Later that evening, as I sat on the couch flipping through the leftover photos from the party, one image stopped me cold. It was Ethan hugging me, his cheek pressed against my chest, his small arms wrapped around my middle like he was anchoring himself to me. That photo, more than the cake, more than the decorations, told the whole story. It was proof that when the noise faded and the balloons deflated, what remained was presence, memory, connection. And no matter what came next, that was mine, unshakable, undeniable, uninvited, but unforgettable. I had just finished folding the last of the tablecloths when I heard the knock again. This one was slower, heavier. I didn't need to guess who it was. I opened the door, and there stood Julia. No makeup, hair pulled back into a messy bun, her phone in one hand, her keys clenched in the other like a weapon she wasn't sure she wanted to use. She didn't say hello. "You embarrassed me," she said, her voice tight. I didn't flinch. "Come in or don't." "Julia, I'm not doing this." In the doorway again, she hesitated, then stepped inside. We stood in the kitchen, the air thick between us. She didn't sit. She paced once, then turned to face me. "You knew what you were doing." "Yes," I said, calm and clear. "I knew exactly what I was doing. You threw a whole party behind my back without even telling me, after you uninvited me from his birthday, after you cut me off like I meant nothing. What did you expect, Julia? That I'd sit quietly while you erased me?" She scoffed. "It wasn't about erasing you. It was about space. You never know when to back off." I looked her straight in the eye. "Back off? From my own grandson? After I raised him every weekend for 4 years? You want me to back off from that?" Her lips trembled just for a second before she masked it. "I'm his mother. I've never tried to take that from you," I said. "But you've tried to take everything from me, the joy, the bond, the right to love him openly." She shook her head and paced again. "You always make yourself the victim." "No," I said quietly. "I stayed silent for years. You think I didn't hear every eye roll? Every dismissal? Every time you corrected me in front of others like I was some old woman who couldn't be trusted? I let it go. I told myself it wasn't worth the fight. I told myself I'd keep the peace." I paused, my voice dropping. "But this time, Julia, you crossed a line. You took something sacred and you used it as a weapon. You turned Ethan's birthday into a punishment. Not just for me, for him." She opened her mouth to respond, but I lifted my hand. "No," I said. "It's my turn." I walked over to the counter and picked up a framed photo of Ethan holding the small dinosaur from the party. I placed it in front of her. "He told me it was the best day of his life." Julia stared at the photo, her arms tightening across her chest. "You humiliated me," she whispered. "No," I said quietly. "I reminded you of what I've done, of who I am, of what you've chosen to forget." She dropped her gaze to the counter. For a long time, she didn't say anything. Then, finally, softly, "You didn't have to do it like that." "I didn't want to do it like that," I said. "But you left me no other choice." The silence between us felt like years. And then something unexpected happened. She looked up at me, her voice low. "He wouldn't stop talking about it." "Your party," she said. "He wished you were at mine." I swallowed hard. My throat burned. I know. For the first time, her shoulders sagged just a little. The fight in her eyes dulled. She leaned against the counter like her legs couldn't carry the weight anymore. "Do you know how hard it is?" she asked, barely above a whisper. "Being a mom. Being judged all the time." I nodded slowly. "Yes," I said, "I do. I remember." She looked at me like she was seeing me clearly for the first time in a long while. "I'm tired," she said. And in that moment, I realized something. So was I. But tired doesn't mean defeated. I didn't reply. I didn't reach out. I let her stand there in that stillness, in that reckoning, because for once, she wasn't in control of the narrative, and she knew it. She picked up her keys, hesitated, and then said without looking at me, "I'll call you," and she left. I sat down with the photos still in front of me. I didn't cry. I didn't celebrate. I just took a deep, steady breath and held onto the only truth I needed. I had finally said the words that had lived in my throat for years. And even if nothing changed after that, I had changed, and that was the beginning of everything. The days that followed felt strange, quiet but not peaceful, the kind of quiet that comes after a fight, when nothing is settled, just suspended in the air, waiting to fall. I didn't hear from Julia. No call, no text, not even a picture of Ethan. And yet, somehow, I knew she was listening. The family group chat went silent. No one said a word. It felt like everyone was waiting to see who would speak first, and no one wanted to take sides. Or maybe they already had. I didn't push. I didn't reach out again. Instead, I focused on what mattered. I printed the photos from the party, framed a few for Ethan's room in my house. I cleaned up the decorations, folded the leftover napkins, and tucked the dinosaur-themed plates into a bin labeled Ethan's stuff. Because despite everything, I still believed he'd be back, maybe not next weekend. Maybe not the one after that. But one day, I had to believe that. Then came the ripple. It started when my niece, Claire, called me. She'd been at both parties. "Hey, Aunt Margaret," she said, hesitant. "I just wanted to say, I think what you did was brave." I sat down slowly. "Brave? Yeah," she said. "I mean, people are talking, but I was there. I saw Ethan on Saturday. He was happy. Not just birthday cake, happy, full heart, light in his eyes, happy." I didn't know what to say. "And on Sunday," she continued, "he just wasn't the same. He looked tired," he told me. "I already had my party with Mimi." He said it like that one was the real one. You know, my throat tightened. "Thank you for telling me," I said. More calls followed, a few texts. A message from a friend at church. "That little boy adores you. Don't let anyone rewrite that." People weren't just choosing sides, they were remembering. And Julia, she couldn't hide from that. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want her shamed or shunned. I just wanted the truth seen. I wanted the record set straight. I wasn't a bitter grandmother acting out of spite. I was someone who had shown up. Someone who had stayed. Someone who had been pushed aside because it was easier than facing what I represented. Love that never left, a mirror that showed her what she didn't want to see. Later that week, I ran into one of Julia's friends at the grocery store. Her smile stalled in that awkward way that tells you everything before a word is said. Finally, she spoke. "I didn't know what was going on," she said. "I just thought maybe you were traveling or something." I smiled, though it didn't reach my eyes. "No," I said. "I was here, just not invited." She shifted, clearly uncomfortable. "Well, the party was nice." "Nice," I repeated. "That's something." She hesitated, then added, "Ethan wouldn't stop talking about your party." And that was the pattern. No one could quite say what they were really thinking, at least not to Julia. But they were starting to see the story differently. The version she'd tried so carefully to control was slipping, not because I fought her, but because I simply lived my truth out loud. And Ethan, he was the loudest part of it. Apparently, he'd told his teacher about my party, too. Drew a picture of the dinosaur cake, told her it was his real birthday. Julia must have heard. I can only imagine how it stung realizing that the event she had meticulously planned had become an afterthought in her own child's mind. And I didn't feel smug, I felt seen. The silence between us was still wide. But I had said everything I needed to say. Now it was her move or not, either way. I was done shrinking. The storm had passed, and in its wake, something new was beginning to grow. Sunday came again, exactly 1 week after everything broke open. The memories were still fresh. Ethan's laughter, the warmth of that church hall, the quiet fire in my chest when Julia confronted me at my own door. But this Sunday wasn't about confrontation. This was her day, her official party, the one she'd planned, the one she'd labeled intimate. The one where I didn't belong. I didn't expect an invitation, and I didn't need one still. I'll admit there was a flicker of curiosity, not about the decorations or the guest list, but about something else. Would they notice? Would they feel the absence? That afternoon, I sat on my porch with a glass of sweet tea and watched the world drift by. The sun was hot, the cicadas loud, and my neighborhood felt strangely quiet for a Sunday. I thought about what Ethan might be doing at that exact moment, blowing out candles, playing games, opening gifts from people who hadn't been there when he cried through stomach aches, or scraped his knees learning to ride a bike. I didn't scroll social media, I didn't need to. The messages found me anyway. First, one from my neighbor Ruth. "I stopped by the party for a bit. It felt weird without you there." Then Claire again. "I think half the guests expected to see you. Ethan kept asking where you were." And then this, "He told me it wasn't his real birthday," he said. "Mimi already gave me the real one." I closed my eyes. It wasn't vindication. It was validation. Proof that presence speaks louder than presentation. That even a child barely 8 can feel the difference between love that shows up and love that simply hosts. Later that evening, I did glance online. Julia had posted a single photo. Ethan stood in front of a pile of gifts, a banner behind him reading "Happy 8th Birthday." The image was fine, polished, pretty, but it felt sterile, like a magazine cover staged by someone trying to prove something. And Ethan wasn't smiling. He didn't look sad or angry, just tired, like someone who had already experienced the celebration that truly mattered. Aunt Kathy called shortly after. She's never taken sides, the kind of woman who brings casseroles to both ends of a family feud. Her voice was gentle, thoughtful. "I just wanted to say," she began, "you did what any real grandmother would have done." "I wasn't trying to compete," I said. "I know," she replied, "but you won anyway." And she was right, just not in the way people usually mean. I didn't win by throwing the bigger party or having more guests. I won because Ethan felt seen. Because I gave him something his mother, in all her planning and curating, had overlooked: a space to simply be loved, not paraded, not posed, not performed. Just loved. And no matter how many presents he opened that day, none of them could compare to the feeling of being held by someone who knew his favorite dinosaur, the name of his imaginary friend, and exactly how he liked the crust cut off his sandwiches. That night, I didn't wait for Julia to reach out. I didn't expect her to. I had already said what needed to be said. I had acted when the silence became unbearable. Now, the quiet belonged to her. And whether she chose to fill it or not, I was no longer afraid of being left out. Because I finally understood I hadn't been excluded. I had risen above pettiness, above shame, above being erased, and in doing so, I found a version of myself I thought I'd lost years ago. The woman who no longer asked for a seat at the table. She brought her own chair. Days passed, and the dust from the party began to settle. The photos stopped appearing. The comments faded. Life, as it always does, moved forward. But something in the air had shifted. Julia still hadn't called, and yet, I knew she would. It was Tuesday afternoon, cloudy and quiet, when my phone finally rang. I stared at the screen longer than I should have, her name glowing like a challenge. Then I answered. "Hi," she said. Her voice small. "Hi." A pause followed, deep and heavy, filled with all the words we had never said. "Can we talk?" she asked. I didn't hesitate. Yes, she came by that evening. No Ethan. No car seat in the back. Just her alone, walking up my porch steps like she wasn't sure she'd be welcomed in. I opened the door and stepped aside. This time, she didn't linger at the threshold. She walked in and sat at the kitchen table, the same place where, just a week earlier, she had stood accusing me of betrayal. But this wasn't that woman. This was someone softer, smaller, tired. I sat across from her. The silence stretched again, long and fragile. She broke it first. "Ethan misses you." I nodded slowly. "I miss him too." She looked down at her hands, twisting her wedding ring like it might give her answers. "I don't know why I did it," she said. "I was just angry." "I don't even know at what." "You were angry at me," I said gently. "Yes," she admitted, her voice cracking. "But it wasn't about the tablet. Or even the party. It's like you were always there. You always have been. And it made me feel like I wasn't. You felt replaced," I said quietly. She looked up at me, tears already forming. "Yes, I let that truth sit between us. Do you know what it's like," she continued, "to be the mom, but feel like the second choice?" The question hit me hard. I had never heard her say anything like that before. "I never wanted to replace you," I said softly. "I only stepped in where there was space. I didn't do it to take over. I did it because he needed me." "Because you needed me." "I know," she whispered. "And I think I resented you for it even while I depended on you." She wiped at her tears. Embarrassed, "I've been so angry at myself," she went on, "for not being more present. For not knowing how to be the kind of mother I thought I should be. And every time Ethan came home talking about you, it just reminded me of everything I thought I wasn't." "You thought you weren't enough," I said. She nodded. I reached across the table slowly, carefully, and placed my hand over hers. "Julia," I said, "you were doing your best. I saw that. I never judged you. Not once." Her lip trembled and she turned her face away. "But you judged me," I continued softly. "You punished me for loving him too well. And that broke something." She sobbed, then not loudly, not dramatically, but deeply. The kind of crying that comes from years of unspoken guilt, from trying to hold everything together, from being a mother who never stopped fearing she wasn't enough. "I'm sorry," she said through the tears. "I was wrong. About everything. You didn't deserve that." Something inside me finally softened, because for the first time, Julia wasn't just speaking, she was listening. I squeezed her hand. "I don't need perfection from you," I said. "I never have. But I do need honesty. I need respect." She nodded, wiping her cheeks. "And I need Ethan to grow up knowing that family means presence," I added. "Not pride. Not power," she whispered. "Okay." We sat there in the dim kitchen light, the past between us like broken glass being slowly swept away. Finally, she looked up at me, eyes red but open. "Do you want to come over this weekend?" she asked. "Spend time with him?" My heart, bruised as it was, still recognized joy when it hurt it. "Yes," I said. "I'd like that very much." She smiled, small, unsure, but real. And for the first time in a long, long time, I saw my daughter not as the woman who had pushed me out, but as the little girl who still needed her mother, not to fix everything, but simply to be there. And that, I realized, I could do. The next few days felt like a slow unfolding. The tension that had hung between us for so long began to ease, like a cloud finally breaking apart after a storm. I didn't expect an instant reconciliation. These things take time. But when Julia called on Friday to say Ethan was looking forward to seeing me, I felt something shift. I was finally going to be in the same room with him again without the weight of anger or silence pressing down. Saturday morning arrived, and I got ready as if I were going to a celebration. The air in my house felt lighter. I wore the same dress I had worn to his first birthday party, the one with the little flowers. It felt like an old memory, untainted by bitterness. I arrived at Julia's house a little early, standing on the porch for a moment, just taking it all in. The house was quiet, still, like it always was when I came for weekends with Ethan. But today was different. Today, I wasn't stepping into a role I was told to fill. I was stepping into a space where I had permission to just be. When the door opened, Ethan was standing there, eyes wide with excitement. "Mimi," he shouted, running straight into my arms. He smelled like cinnamon and toothpaste, his little arms wrapping around me as tightly as his small body could manage. I bent down to hug him back. "Hey, buddy. How's my favorite dinosaur expert?" I asked. He grinned, showing off that same gap-toothed smile. "I'm the best at dinosaurs, you know that." "I do," I said, ruffling his hair. "I brought you something." I handed him a small gift bag. His eyes lit up as he pulled out the little dino figurines I knew he'd been wanting. He hugged them to his chest like they were the most precious treasures in the world. Julia stood behind him, arms crossed, watching us. She was quiet, unsure, but I could see a softening in her expression. She didn't move. She didn't interrupt. She let us have this moment, and for once, that was enough. We all went inside. Ethan led the way, proudly showing me the newest drawings he had made and the puzzles he was working on. Julia stayed in the background, not quite engaging, but not pulling away either. It was as though we were standing together on new ground, unsure what would come next, but willing to move forward one step at a time. We ate lunch together. Nothing fancy, just sandwiches and chips, but it felt warm, genuine, like we had finally returned to some semblance of normal. No forced conversations, no hidden resentments. Just us, sharing space as a family again. After lunch, we walked to the park. Ethan raced ahead, laughing, his joy filling the air around us. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was walking on eggshells. I was just there in the moment with the people I loved. Julia and I stayed behind, walking side by side. The distance between us shrank bit by bit. "I'm sorry, Mom," she said quietly, her voice low but steady. "I should have never treated you like that." "I don't know what I was thinking." "I know," I replied softly. "And I'm sorry too for not standing up for myself sooner, for letting the silence grow between us." She looked over at me, and for the first time I saw vulnerability in her eyes. Not the coldness I had grown used to, but something real. "You were right," she said. "I did need you, and I didn't know how to ask." "You don't have to ask," I said gently. "You never did. I'm your mother, and I'm always here, just like I always have been." She nodded, the tension in her shoulders finally relaxing. "I don't deserve you," she whispered. I shook my head. "We all make mistakes. It's how we fix them that matters." We walked in silence for a few moments, the weight of unspoken words finally lifting. When we reached the park, Ethan was on a swing, legs kicking out in that carefree way only children can manage. He saw us and waved. "Mom, Mimi, come push me." Julia and I exchanged a look, a quiet moment of understanding, a signal that things were starting to heal. No words, just the understanding that we'd made it to the other side of something painful, something hard. But now we had a chance to rebuild, to create something new. I sat on the swing next to Ethan, pushing him gently. He laughed, arms stretched wide, calling out, "Higher, Mimi, higher." And for the first time in a long while, I felt exactly where I was meant to be. Not asking for permission, not waiting for validation, just being there, present as his grandmother, as his family. Julia stood by the park bench, watching us. She didn't need to say anything more. The past few weeks, the tension, the hurt, had finally been spoken, finally been felt. And now we were moving forward, not as perfect people, but as real people trying to do better, trying to heal. The swing creaked beneath me. The wind rustled through the trees, and for the first time, I realized that sometimes the most beautiful things aren't the loudest or the brightest. They're the quiet moments of connection, the slow shifts in relationships, the moments that pass without fanfare but leave you feeling like you've come home. As I pushed Ethan higher, his laughter filling the air, I felt it. I had my family back. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.